Ladies and gentlemen, today is November 18th, 2015, and this is the KNKL SHOW, episode 270, where we learn to be better artists. Today is Tutorial Wednesday because I was a naughty boy and I didn't release an episode yesterday. I'm sorry, but I do have an explanation for you. But before we get into that excuse, we need to take a stroll down the lovely lane because you guys have been being awesome and submitting your artwork to the page. And if you don't know what this is, then type in that tiny URL right there, tinyurl/KNKL fanart. Go check it out for yourself. It's the Facebook, right? Backed by the Facebook Blue. You can like the page, submit all kinds of cool stuff, get your art featured, and most importantly, come get some cookies. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into today's tutorial, and that is... what did I actually name it? What was it named again? Mask setup. That's right, mask setup. And we're going to be setting up masks on our violet piece. And this leads me into my excuse, right? I didn't release my episode yesterday because I was working really, really hard on this from about the point that we were from last week. Wait, where is that? Okay, from last week. See, this is where we were. And getting it to a point that I feel was ready to move into the next step, right? The masks and all that stuff. And as you can see, there was quite a bit of changes that needed to be done. So that was why I decided to take a little bit of extra time. I wanted to focus on the quality of the episode. But anyway, excuse out of the way. I'm now forgiven. Now we can continue. Let's continue along our merry way because it is November. It's about time to be Thanksgiving and then Christmas. And I just love this time of year. So let's be thankful, right? Let's be thankful that there is an episode at all. So let's continue with where we're going. So today we're going to be setting up masks. And the first thing that I want to talk about is just a couple things that, just as a recap of everything that we've done thus far. And if you guys want to see how we got to this point, then just go back a couple weeks on the channel and you can see the previous versions of this and how we even got to this point. But just as a quick refresher, let's start from where we were last week, okay? So basically the main thing that I focused on doing here was we're talking about sketch lifting. Before, I always had you guys do this thing where you would be, say you're sketching out a face. You're sketching out a face, and I would always tell you don't paint with grays, right? If you want to draw a face, draw it like this, and then use the opacity, right, or use the pressure sensitivity of your stylus to create grays, right? But whatever you do, do not ever paint with gray because then that's going to mess up the whole thing. That's going to mess up the whole thing that we're going to do because eventually we're going to start line coloring. And we disproved that myth recently because people are awesome and they showed me how to actually take a black and white piece and turn it transparent. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that again in a very, very quick way because I also did do a tutorial on sketch lifting, but that way was like, it still works, but it's like a roundabout way. It takes like 10 steps. I had another one of my friends, Ty Grenier, show me how to do it in about 3 steps. So we're going to go ahead and get into that. So basically, all in all, you should be able to create a piece, and notice this is all on one layer, this layer 11. This is all blacks and whites. This is not my usual setup where I will, you know, like have the blacks be like, the blacks are the only thing that's opaque and everything is just see-through, okay? That's basically what I'm saying. But let's talk about how we got to this point, okay? How we got to this point and what we did. So there was just a lot of cleaning up, a lot of just kind of like figuring out, like really just clarifying the edges. Like where's the edge of this robe piece, right? Or like this jacket piece. Where are the edges of these chains that are hanging down, right? Where are the edges of these belts, you know? And still stuff is pretty sketchy, but I like a little bit of that flavor in my stuff, right? I like a little bit of that flavor in my style. So we're going to keep that. We're going to keep that in there. And now we are going to, I'm going to show you guys a couple things that are really important. One is actually, the first thing that I'm going to show you is that I actually have this character on its own layer. This character is on its own layer. So the background is actually just a multiply layer that I set over top of it. And that's just to give it like a general idea of what I want the background to be. But that's going to be a whole different thing. Most important thing is that you have your character on its own layer. Right, so a nice clean character with clean edges, right? Clean edges. Let me show you what it looked like before. This is kind of the stuff that you want to watch out for, like these little artifacts and stuff. Get rid of that, go in there, kind of erase it, clean it up. Just make sure that you have those nice clean edges because that's going to come in handy for what we're about to do right now. In fact, I can see some other edges that need to be cleaned up really quick before we move on. There we go. Just get a little bit of that in there, clean that up. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes I would use my actual ink brush, which is basically my straight up, like, it's just a hard round brush, and it's like, it will take your sketches to the pixel, right? If you want to do it like that, which is one way to do it. But for this one, I kind of liked a little bit of that rougher edge. I liked a little bit of that rougher edge, especially for, like, this is a character from my comic, and the comic lines, even themselves, are kind of like rough and kind of sketchy, apocalyptic looking. So they don't have to be perfect. Like, your edges don't have to be perfect, but they must be clean and rid of all those little tiny artifacts that used to be there. So you can see me clicking that on and off. All right, so let's move into the part that's going to blow your mind. We're going to take this picture, and we are going to, in 3 steps, do what I taught you a couple weeks ago in like 3 seconds, okay? So what you're going to do is direct your attention down below. You have layers, and then you have channels. So that's interesting. What is channels? I don't know. Maybe a different channel. Maybe you can go to Nickelodeon or something. So let's go ahead and pull this up. Oh, we just have 4 channels. Okay, well, that doesn't really matter. The most important thing is that you look at is this button right here. That button straight down right there. If you click that, watch what happens. It's going to select everything. It's going to select something. We don't know what it is, but let's go ahead and take away our character. Hey, that's interesting. It looks like a selection of our character. Well, what happens if we fill that selection with a color, right? We're going to fill that selection. Whoops. And we need to create a new layer. We're going to fill the selection, and what does it give us? It gives us an X-ray version of our character, but that's not what we want. It's the opposite. So what we have to do is, let's go back before we filled this. We still have our selection, right? So hit that button, and then you do Shift-Control-I. Shift-Control-I. And then that's going to invert your selection. It won't look any different here. Don't be fooled. It doesn't actually change anything on your screen, but you have now inverted your selection. And when you fill it now, you will have a lifted version, a completely lifted version of your sketch. And just to prove it to you, let's go ahead and take away that background. Oh, it is brilliant. And now it's ready to go, right? So that is a really cool way to set up your sketch. Set up your sketch for masking. Masking, which is up next. One of my favorite things ever. So let's go ahead and do that. Do that. And if you just missed what I just did, just go back and watch it again. It's easy. You just go to channels, click that button, Shift-Control-I, and then fill it. And then that will make a lifted version of your sketch, which is now transparent. And that's going to come in handy right now. So let's go ahead and get into that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to color these lines, or I'm going to fill these lines. Oh, the other thing is, if you ever want to change these lines, you want to make sure that you lock your pixels first. Lock these pixels, because this is going to, for those of you who know about my line coloring technique, this is essential. This is essential. So go ahead, let's go ahead and pull this up, give it a little bit more room. So make sure you click this little checkerboard right here, because that's going to lock everything. And then you can fill with your foreground color, which is what you chose right over there. It'll make everything dark. Ah, that is very nice, very nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and move this all the way to the top. And we got all these other layers in here, which we don't need right now. So let's go ahead and get rid of those, except for that background. We need that background. So let's put that background up there too. I'll make sure I label it so that way we can remember it for later, but let's collapse all those other things. All we're worrying about is this layer and the background, okay? But for now, we're just worrying about this one. So let's go ahead and take out our magical fairy wand, and let's select everything around it. And our tolerance is way too low. Oh, it's actually not sampling all the sample all layers. There we go. I usually like to put my tolerance around like 50. That way it does kind of like, it goes a little bit in more towards like the grays and those little artifacts. It'll get you closer to where you want. Like, see how there's that little imperfection in there, but see how it still selects inside of that? That's good. That's good. You want that. So let's go ahead and select all of the outside areas of our character. Like that, that. There's lots of little openings here. We got to make sure we get all of those. All right, so now we're going to do something very important. Very, very important. And that is, we have the selection of everything around our character. Now I'm going to ask that you go up to Select, then you go to Modify, and then Expand. And the reason why we're expanding this, I'm expanded by like 3 pixels, is because, have you ever like done this exact thing where you've like wanded something and then filled it, and then there's like this weird kind of like, there's like these weird little colors that go just outside of the line. There's like little artifacts or little pixels that go outside of your line work. And because that happens to me all the time, and it drives me freaking crazy. Drives me bananas, right? Ape bananas. So what you do is you bring that selection in, you tighten it up a little bit. So now your mask is actually going to exist slightly inside of your lines. So you won't have any more of that crazy crap of like the stupid artifacts or like little pixelated glitches that only show up at like certain zoom angles. Like it shows up at 66.7, but not at 50, you know? And then again at 33.3, it's so annoying. So anyway, but here's the problem. Is that we selected everything around the character. So, hey, can you guess what we're gonna do here? We're gonna invert that selection once again. So the shortcut for that is Shift-Control-I. We're gonna invert it, and nothing will, it looks like nothing changes, really, but lo and behold, you have now just masked your entire character. Oh, that's so amazing. Wait, are you telling me that I don't have to sit here and, well, okay, hang on, because the way I was doing this before was I didn't even use the magic wand. What I did was I said, okay, time to mask. Time to mask. All right, so let's go ahead. Okay, I'll choose this color right here. Yeah, that's great. And then I will, okay, so let's get like my ink brush because I want my mask to be really tight and really clean. Okay, let's start like manual masking. And then you just do that. Oh, you're like, oh, okay, well, I can fix that. Let's go ahead and just get that. Oh, that's the wrong brush. Okay, so like, let's do that. And then you slowly but surely, you like take the next hour of your time like trying to make a manual mask. Don't do this. If I catch you doing this, I will find you. I'm just letting you know that right now. And the light is like spilling into this room right now. That's the other reason why I thought about doing this today rather than last night, because last night it was all dreary, it was all cloudy, it was late. And I like the way that the video looks when got that nice natural sunlight coming in, right? It just looks so nice and lively. So, but anyway, we're going off on a tangent. Let's go back to this. So anyway, no manual masking for you anymore. No more of that crap. You're gonna save a ton of time just by doing what I just showed you. Select everything outside the character, grow the mask by a couple pixels, then invert it. And then you have a magical mask. And there will be some imperfections, right? Like say in here, you might have to go in and clean like something like that up or like this and that. But overall, I mean, if you do that really clean edge technique, like with a hard round brush or anything like that, then you will have a perfect mask. But for the most part, like I like a little bit of that grittiness in the finer details of my piece. So anyway, okay, so that's step one, done. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we're gonna go ahead and move our background to the background. Imagine that. Because before it was a multiply, like I said it as a multiply because it's just black and white, and that was an easy way for me to put it in front of the character, you know, because before the character was like see-through, and so like the background, if you move it around, see how it like goes into the character, it just doesn't work. So I just set it as a multiply, eventually went back. I don't even know if you knew what I just said, but it doesn't matter. Background's now in the background. So now, let us also, can we color this background? I wonder. Oh no, that's not gonna work either. We need to do the same thing with the background, I think. We need to turn that into a mask too. Okay, well whatever, we're not gonna deal with that right now. Right now what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on just kind of laying out a composition, okay? So there's a couple different things that I thought of for this piece, right? Now one is like a blue background, right? So we're gonna go ahead and just fill this blue, okay? And then this might be a good way, this is very important to do for a couple reasons. You wanna establish what your main ambient light is, your main ambient light. Now, the reason for this is because it's going to affect all of the other colors in your piece. Imagine that, right? Because like, and this has to do with ambient occlusion, and what that basically means is, a simple way to put that is the shadows of your character and all of the subjects in your piece are going to move toward the ambient color in the piece. So if it's blue, your shadows will start to become more blue. If it's orange, your shadows will start to become more orange. But that's a whole nother tutorial for another time. Let's just kind of focus on picking a color. So in the comic, the actual real world is kind of like this weird blue. It's kind of like this. Yeah, it's kind of like this nice dark blue, right? But then I wanted to have some contrast. I wanted to have some contrasting lights that are going to be warm. So maybe something more like these. Maybe something more like these. So let's go ahead and pick our soft brush. I'll just kind of lay this in like that. Get us some nice contrast in there, okay? Yeah, not bad, not bad. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. Put some more darks in there like that. And that looks pretty good for right now. That's a good start. That's what you call a good start. Just picking some colors that you want to work with. I like those ones. I don't want it to be a little bit more like that. There we go. There we go. All right. So now that we have our ambient colors picked, right? We have blues up top and a little bit of orange warm lights on the bottom. Now let's go ahead and begin masking our character, okay? Let's begin masking our character. And the way that I like to do this is I like to think about just my ambient lights. So here's a good example of that. So let's say, okay, well, we're gonna paint the skin. Now Violet is a dark skinned character, so what we might normally do is we'll say, okay, well, what color is dark skin? We'll go like a dark brown, like this, right? Let's go ahead and throw that in. And the way that I like to do this, just as a heads up, is I have my character mask right here. I call it char mask, which is basically the main silhouette. It's the main silhouette of the character. And this allows me to create new layers over top of it, like this layer 21. Then what I do is I hold Alt, right? Hold Alt, and then this magical little icon appears when you hover between the two layers. And if you click it like that, hey, look at that. That arrow appears right there. What did I just do? That is called a clipping mask. And what that does is it allows you to paint all crazy outside the lines, like this. Allows you to paint crazy all outside the lines. But see how I paint out here and it doesn't show up? Well, if I unclip it by using the same method, you can see that all that color is actually there. But when I clip it back, it just basically keeps it in the lines. So no longer do you have to worry about going outside the lines either. So each new, and this is very important too, because each new layer that you create must be on its, or each new color that you create must be on its own layer, okay? And that's gonna come into play in a little bit. But let's focus on what we were talking about before. Okay, so we have this dark skin, right? We have this dark skin. And you might say, okay, well, that looks nice. That looks really nice. But the problem, I would say, is that this does not take into account our ambient color. So here's how we're gonna calculate that, okay? So we're hovering around, and I want you guys to look at this hue right here. This has to do with mixing color. And there's gonna be a little bit of color theory here, but I'm gonna keep it simple for you, okay? So you have red, right, on our hue Richter scale over here, and we have blues in the background. So what happens when you mix those two colors together? Well, you're gonna move toward purple, right? You're going to go through this little portal, you know, kind of like Pac-Man. When you go through one end of the screen, you come out on the other. That's what happens here. You go through one side, come out on the other, and you move towards purple. So we're going to have something a little bit more like this. This is going to be our ambient color of the skin. And in general, I like to think about it like this. I like to think of it as I'm painting the shadows first, painting the shadows of all of these different colors first, and then what I'm going to do later is I'm going to go in there and I will begin painting the lights. So let's go ahead and do that. And at first this is going to look a little bit confusing. You're going to be like, what? That looks kind of weird. She just looks like she has purple skin now. But rest assured, we will get this done. We will get this done and it's going to look really good. Okay, so the other thing that I failed to do was I failed to have a character chart, because this is kind of like one of the first drawings that I've ever done of Violet like this, or even in general. So I still need to figure out a lot of her like character design or her color design. But what the heck, we'll just go for it, right? You guys can watch me come up with this stuff on the fly, because there are a couple things that I do know. There are a couple things that I am sure of that I want to do, and that is a couple things like the golden pieces. And another good thing to do is also name your layers. You'll thank yourself for it later. Let's go ahead and save. I'm going to go ahead and start coloring in these golden pieces. And that looks pretty good. But I still look at that color and I'm like, it's not exactly what looks like if this blue light was lightly shining on that gold, it wouldn't be that color. I think it's actually going to move a little bit more towards red, or maybe it would move towards green because you have yellow and green. Let's try that actually and like desaturate it. Let's try something more like this. Ooh, actually that does look good. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, there we go. There we go. That's the color of our golds right there. So let's go ahead and paint all of our golds green. Interesting. Interesting. But do you guys see what I'm doing? I'm painting shadows first. I'm painting the darkest versions of these colors that would be being affected by this ambient light first. Oh, I totally forgot to paint the boobs. How terrible of me. How terrible of me. Sorry, I'm such a bad man. Please forgive me. Forgive me. Okay, back to the golds. Now here's another cool thing about working on different layers, right? And I know this can be tough. I know sometimes you'll forget to go down here and switch your layer, and then you'll like accidentally paint the skin on the gold layer. Don't worry, that happens to me many times, but the struggle is worth it. The struggle and the pain is worth it, because once you're done, it's gonna make coloring this thing a heck of a lot easier. A heck of a lot easier. So much easier. And then every now and then you'll notice like, hey, there's some weird things with this character mask going on, like this area I forgot to kind of cut out, so you can go back in there and just erase it. All right, let's continue with these golds. Oh, and the other cool thing about this is another reason why I like to put everything on its own layers, because sometimes I will say, okay, now that I'm putting more golds down, I feel like it does need to be just slightly warmer. So I'll actually lock the pixels again. So that's basically saying lock everything right here, lock everything that is gold, and then fill it with this different color. See how that looks. Does that look a little bit better? Yeah, I would say so. Actually, I like it just a little bit warmer. So let's go ahead and go with that. Moving on. I'm probably not going to paint every single gold piece on this, because this is probably going to take a little while. And I do want to move into the next part, and explain, show you guys another really cool thing about making sure that all of your layers are separated, because it allows you to experiment with color. That's really what I was going to get at here, is that this is all about experimenting with color, because all the time I used to look at these pieces done by, these artists, and they would use these weird colors, like they would say, okay, we're gonna paint gold, but it's not gold, it's actually a very dark desaturated orange. And they would use that color, and I'm like, well, how did they know to pick that? And really, I think what it comes down to is your eyes will not lie to you, right? Like if you just put a color down and then you compare it to the colors that are around it, your brain will either tell you that looks right or it looks out of place, it looks contrived, it looks strange. So that's why making all of your layers separate is nice, because then you can either pick a new color right here and say, okay, well, I want it to be bright orange, like a pumpkin. Then you lock it and fill it, and then you could do that, right? And then obviously those two colors don't go together at all. But another cool thing that you can do is you can also hit Control U, which is your hue shifter. And now you can mess around with it that way and find a color. You can adjust it very, very slightly to get that ambient color that you're looking for, get the exact hue that you're looking for. So that's really nice. Whereas if you didn't do this, if you don't have all your colors on different layers, you can't do that. Like imagine if, let's just flatten these two layers, or let's combine these two layers. The skin and the gold are on one layer, and now I want to change the hues. See how it's changing everything now? That's why you want to make sure all of your different materials are on different layers, okay? Or else I will find you. I will find you. Even those of you that would like me to find you, I will come get you. I will come get you, and you will regret it. You will regret not separating your layers. So don't make me do that. Don't make me have to do that. All right. So let's go ahead and continue with this. I do want to give her a general. Do I want this to be gold or? Yeah, whatever. I'll just make it gold for right now. I do want to get a general feeling for how this is going to look. And we're in luck because we're doing all the hard parts first. We're doing all of the details first. And then we're going to fill the rest of it with her suit color. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's do that right now. Why not? Let's just see what we're working with. So I know that the Marauders, they have kind of like this like low kind of dark, I imagine it's like a really dark leather, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go with like this deep blue. I'm gonna go with this deep blue because of our ambient colors. I'm gonna warm it up a little bit just because it is that leather. And let's go ahead and go with something like this. Let's lay that down. See how that looks. Ah, very nice, very nice. But I am going to hue shift it just a little bit warmer. Ah, yes, that's good. And the next thing I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to paint some lighter parts too. Some lighter parts. Because I do want a good differentiation between, the darks and the lights. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just make this one called lighter. And you'll notice that I actually made that, I filled the entire character with that color, but see, because our skin and our gold is in front of it right here on these two layers, that's the nice thing about doing all the details first, because then you can fill in everything behind it, like the big colors, and then it just kind of looks really natural. It looks really nice. So I do know for certain that we are going to have lighter colors, however, here on this part of the jacket. So let's go ahead and just fill that in general. In general, looks good. Yes, that looks nice. That looks really nice. And then also this part is going to be lighter as well. Let's go ahead and color all that in. And that's a good start. That's what you call a good start. Good start. Good head start. Okay, now let's see here. What's the next thing that I wanted to do? Let's put those eyes on really quick, and then let's move into lighting. Lighting is the next thing that's up. Maybe we'll just focus on this top part here, because rather than try to like color the entire character, that could get a little bit crazy. We'll just focus on this here. Okay, but I do want the eye to not be that bright, otherwise it looks like it's glowing. There we go. There you go. Make it a little bit more red. Or maybe I should make it more blue. Let's make it more blue, almost like this color. Yeah, there you go. See, that's what I'm talking about, that ambient light, because you have a white, you have the white of the eye, and it's picking up the blues around it. So you're gonna have something more like this. You have something a little bit more like that for the eye. Rather than just say, okay, the eye's white, let's paint it white. Do you see how that looks strange now compared to everything? There you go, that's a good start. That's a good start. I'm also gonna take that same color, I'm gonna just paint the teeth that too. Just gonna change it a little bit more towards that teal. Something like that. We are spilling over into areas that we should not, so let's go ahead and just kind of correct that really quick. Actually like the eye of that color too. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so let's talk about lighting now. Let's talk about lighting, because this is the most important part, and we'll focus on the face, okay? So because we're awesome and we actually like laid out everything, we actually have a lot of our values already done, okay? But let's talk about lighting. So the first thing that I really thought of was that we would have a very dramatic like underlighting happening here, like this orange, this warm light, and then maybe some more warm lights on the top. But first, let's start with this. Let's start with this underlighting here, because that's kind of how I set up my values to be. See how all the lighter parts of her face are like right here on the jaw and the underside of her nose and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and get into that right now. So let's go back to our skin layer and let's begin. So this is the cool part. This is the really, really cool part. So you've already laid out your shadows, which are taking into account your blue ambience, your ambient colors. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start moving towards a little bit more like towards your ambient, or not your ambient, your lit colors, right? So I want you to imagine, what would the color of this skin look like with an orange light shining on it? What would it look like? Well, it's obviously gonna go more orange, probably gonna be something right around here, okay? So let's go ahead and pick that, and now we have our soft brush, and now we're gonna lightly start laying in those lights. Ah, very nice. And see how already our values, our lines are already kind of making some of those values work immediately. Okay, so we're gonna have something like that. Ah, you see where we're going now? Yes, yes, that looks very nice. That looks very nice. So this is doing a couple things here. One is we are automatically building in our hue shifts. And a hue shift is basically, again, direct your attention to this Richter scale. So watch what happens when I drag the pointer, or this eyedropper, from here to here. Do you see how it's moving towards, do you see how it went through the other side and came out more towards purple? That's called a hue shift, and it basically makes your art look amazing. So you should always do it, okay? But we have built-in hue shifts because we have a warm light, right? So we have these oranges here, and then we're moving towards purples, which is our ambient color and the shadow combined together. And we just did a lot of the work. We just made the computer do a lot of the work for us, okay? So that's freaking awesome. But here's another thing that I want you guys to watch out for. And this is probably one of the most important things, and the whole reason why we set up the piece the way we did and did that whole trick at the very beginning where we lifted the sketch, right? Because if we take away all this stuff, take away all these magical things, we just have, we have see-through lines, right? And we can color these lines whatever we choose. And that's gonna come in handy right about now. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back to where we were. Now, this is something that you're always gonna run into, is you'll be painting, especially when you do like lighter colors. You'll get up to here, and then do you notice how this starts to happen? Do you see that right there? You see how it starts to get like kind of gray? It becomes muddy. This is something that's called muddy. So you have a nice color here, and then it starts to move to this, and see how like the direction of this, like pay attention to this little dot, right? See how it goes more so in a straight line down? That unfortunately does not work, because we want to tell ourselves, oh, okay, well, I'm going to paint shadows. So if this is the color of the skin when it's bright, then all I got to do is just bring it down. And that's the color of the skin when it's dark in the shadow. But it just doesn't work that way. It does not work that way in real life, which is why when we see this happen, especially on a character's face, it looks really weird. It looks unnatural and it looks muddy. But here's how you're going to fix that. Okay. So first of all, you're going to, I actually kind of like a little bit more of this in there. Okay, anyway, getting sidetracked. I can deal with the fine details later. But here's how you're going to fix that. You're going to lock the pixels of your lines right here. So if we take away the lines, look, this is what our character looks like. This is what our character looks like. Wow, crazy. The lines actually add so much. They add so much detail to it. Okay? But here's what you're going to do. I'm going to ask you, specifically with skin, this is really where it comes in handy, is you're going to paint those colors, you're going to paint those lines a very, very dark red, a very, very dark red, like this. Okay? And you go ahead and take your soft brush, and I want you to just go ahead and start painting that in and watch what happens. Paint that in, especially in like areas like this. Here, let's go ahead and zoom in so you can actually see what's happening. And maybe I'll exaggerate it just to show you what will actually happen. So let's say we wanted to paint the lines like this color. So look, as I paint this, do you see how it only paints areas where those lines were? That's basically what we're doing here. We are softening those lines. We're softening those lines and we're adding life back into them. Adding life back into them. And it really helps to go like sometimes really saturated on this. Really saturated dark red. So you go in there and you paint stuff like this. You paint that in, and then you're going to start getting another interesting thing happening. In fact, I'm probably going to pull this even more towards purple because we do have that ambience. Maybe something more like that. Yeah, there we go. Let's go ahead and paint all that stuff purple too, all that. Oh, and I should have done this on another layer, dang it. And I'm going to sneeze. Hang on. All right. So I love that sneeze button. Okay. So let's go ahead and compare these two things. What did we just do? Okay. So we went from this, and then we did this. By painting the lines, we got to this point. Now that's a very, very subtle change. However, there's something very important that happened there. And that is that we breathed life. We breathed life back into the lines. And now they're lighter again. We added a little bit more color to them. So we're staying away from that muddy texture, that muddy feeling that we're gonna get, okay? And this is especially important. It's less important in the shadows. Like you can get away with it in the shadows. Like if you wanted to just do like really super dark, almost black, you can do that in areas like here and in here. And it actually looks kind of nice. It looks kind of nice to do it in the shadows. But what you don't wanna do is you don't wanna have those dark colors. You don't want to have dark lines, so to speak, in the areas where your lights are happening. You're going to have stuff more like this. You're going to have brighter reds. And especially on those transitions, because this is going to simulate subsurface scattering. And that is what happens on your skin when the light transitions from light to shadow. Because there's a lot of extra little light particles that are bouncing around on the inside of your face and in your blood vessels. And that creates a little subtle glow, that happens when you go from one side of your face, from the light side of your face to the dark side of your face, okay? So really, really put those in those areas of transition, okay? And then you'll have something like that. And that looks really okay. There you go. But don't get too carried away with it. Don't get carried away with the subsurface. Sometimes it does look a little strange. You got to kind of bring it back a little bit. Whoop. You got to bring it back. There we go. But this is giving us a good start. Again, everything's coming back to that phrase. Good start. Because now, let's take a look. Is there a way that I can see what this looked like before? Shoot. Where was that thing? Here we go. That's what I was looking for. So, do you see how we went from black and white, then we changed our lines to be see-through, we masked the character, and now we've gotten to this point. And now with this, we have so many interesting things that are happening in here. We have the lights, we have hue shifting, right? And this is really fun to do. Just grab your eyedropper and move it back and forth, and then just watch how your little Richter scale on your hue bar changes. And that means that you are on a good path. And then we have, on top of that, we have all of our shadows and values mostly worked out. So this face already looks good. And we didn't have to do a lot of overpainting, which is the final step, which we're going to probably be going into in the next episode, overpainting, where you go above and beyond everything. You put a layer on top of everything, and then you start going in there, and then you're really beginning to paint. Like everything that you say goes from this point on. You could paint out that eye. You could give her like another eye patch, and then she's like blind in both eyes, whatever you want to do. But the problem is that oftentimes I tried to solve all my problems in the overpaint stage. And that's a really, really tough and aggravating place to do that. Whereas if you have your value set down, early, paint your lines and mask everything, then you can experiment with a bunch of stuff. You can experiment with colors. You can experiment with your ambient occlusion and come up with some color palettes that look really dang cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is how you set up your piece. That is how you set up your pieces. Really glad I was able to summarize everything that happened over the last couple of weeks. Hope this helps you guys out. People on YouTube, thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't. I still don't have my sponsors available, but I will say their names. Laura Bashir, Nonplussed, and David Chiariello. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show, as well as all you viewers out there on YouTube. If you'd like to support the show, then click this thing right here. It'll take you to Patreon, and you can get today's PSD. I'll be uploading today's PSD onto there, and you can take a look at all the layers for yourself. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end it, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you once again. You guys have a great rest of the week. I'll see you next week. And until then, you guys take care. See ya.